Hi, welcome to this fundraiser celebration of Bill Weber's legacy. Bill was the president of New York Theological Seminary, and his work, his visionary work, defined much of what the seminary is today. Originally, we had planned to celebrate this time together on May 2nd, on what would have been his 100th birthday. And we were going to do it together over a wonderful meal with music and celebration at the East Harlem Tutorial Programs building. A program that's very close to the hearts of the Webers. He started in their kitchen many years ago. But unfortunately, we had to change everything because of the pandemic. And so instead of a physical gathering, we've put together this virtual event for you. And we hope you enjoy it. We thank you for joining us. I hope you get to learn something new about Bill Weber and also learn something new about how the seminary is carrying on that legacy, the work that he did into the future. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dawn Ravella, a graduate of the DMin program at NYTS in 2013. I'm the founder and director of the Coming Home Institute, a prison reentry program which I'm expanding with support from NYTS. Like many of you, I never met Bill Weber, but my life today is deeply influenced by his work. Bill Weber was the president of NYTS from 1969 to 1983. He was an internationally known leader in theological education and urban ministry. Born on May 2, 1920 in Des Moines, Iowa, he went on to Harvard on a basketball scholarship. After graduating magna cum laude in 1942, he joined the Navy and served during World War II as a gunnery officer on the USS Bremen. On August 27, 1943, he married his college sweetheart, Helen Dibby Barton. After the war, Bill entered Union Theological Seminary, from which he received a Bachelor of Divinity degree in 1948 and went on to earn his Ph.D. from Columbia University in 1963. In 1948, he and two other seminary graduates, Don Benedict and Archie Hargraves, founded the East Harlem Protestant Parish. The Webers moved their family to the public housing projects of East Harlem in 1956, where they lived until 2003. In 1969, Bill became the president of the Biblical Seminary of New York, a post he held until 1983. Under his leadership, the name was changed to New York Theological Seminary, and its mission became one of dynamic urban transformation. The seminary became a leader in providing theological training to a broad range of urban pastors, from storefronts to cathedrals, with a student body of African American, Latino, Korean, and European American pastors and laypersons. Bill established the Masters of Professional Studies program to provide theological education to people who were incarcerated at the Sing Sing Correctional Facility in Ossining, New York. People who were serving prison sentences from across the state vied for admission to the program, which Bill directed and taught until 2000. The program has graduated more than 512 men, many of whom are now leaders in our communities. Many other ministries spun off from this work, including Coming Home. I created this prison reentry program 12 years ago with the support and mentorship of NYTS MPS alumni every step of the way. Ample research proves the efficacy of the program, including my own doctorate at NYTS, which focuses on the transformation of congregant participants who are mobilized to work for social change. Today, alongside the NYTS MPS family, we have expanded to include work for racial reconciliation and restorative justice. All of this powerful work is a ripple from Bill Weber's efforts. In 1981, when Yale University awarded him an honorary doctorate, Bill was recognized as a prophet for the cause of justice. On the year that would have marked his 100th birthday, we are celebrating his legacy by highlighting the many prophets for the cause of justice he has launched into the world. Please join me in watching these reflections from those who knew him.
I first met Bill Weber in 1968. I had just become pastor of the Grace Baptist Church in the Bronx in 1967, just having graduated from seminary. And I heard that there was this urban ministry master's program at New York Theological Seminary. So I was with him during this transition to this new kind of education, in which we did away with all the previous degree programs and began to focus on continuing education for clergy, for laity, began to open the doors to Latino, African American churches, Pentecostal churches. It was an exciting time in which we were expanding the reach of theological education. The unserved were now becoming served in an accessible and affordable way. And that really came out of Bill's vision. The pedagogy of the oppressed was one of our primary texts. Is how do you teach people to learn and teach them rooted in the context of the culture, really focused on the city. So Bill, one of his mantras was Jeremiah 19, seek ye the welfare of the city, and in its welfare you will find your welfare. So there was this real commitment to the city as it was, not as just a mission field, but as the birthplace of ministry. And from the beginning, the focus in this rebirth of theological education took up what I call prophetic concerns. That is, we were concerned about racism, classism, sexism from the get-go. And we were one of the few theological schools in the country that was dealing with such issues in such an aggressive, non-residential way that was focused on the need of ministry.
Bill Weber, and because I have an understanding of his initial engagement with wanting to bring the master's program into Sing Sing, I have a little bit of that history. And so when it first began, Bill Weber came out of nowhere, at least for the people in prison. No one knew him. He didn't have any cred with people in the prison system. And it was Reverend Ed Muller, who was a prison chaplain, who basically gave Bill Weber some of his cred, because in the very beginning, there were, before people even had that understanding of the hermeneutics of suspicion, people suspected Bill Weber. Some thought he was a CIA agent or something. So, which was really funny, because we would jokingly, when he would say that we could ultimately be agents of change, we said, yeah, he must be a CIA agent, right? But Bill knew that there was really something special that we as a society locked up in our total institutions, our prisons, our mental health institutions.
When I think of Bill being prophetic, I don't think about Sing Sing. What I do think about is how this man, world known, known around the world, a change agent, powerful in the faith community, significant status in the faith community. One, he raised his kids in East Harlem in 1940s, 1950s. He didn't have to do that. Okay, that had to be a conscious decision. Okay, in the projects, he didn't have a home. He raised them in the projects because whatever message he wanted to tell his kids as an outsider, raising, I don't know if it's 3 or 4. I don't remember how many brothers and sisters Tom had, but just that was a conscious decision, for this white guy to raise his family, a white guy with means, a white guy with resources, a white guy with connections, to raise his family in those neighborhoods. That says more to me about the man than what he does at Sing Sing, and how he helped the least of these, how he reached out to the prisoner and all of that. That's a greater statement.
I consider Bill Weber, I would place him in the pantheon of people like Howard Thurman, the people like Martin Luther King Jr. Bill Weber, Dr. Lynn, did not have to do what he did. He was privileged. He was educated. He spoke out against the Vietnam War. The Black men predominantly whom he worked with at Sing Sing, they revered him because of his sincerity and authenticity. If you could describe someone who really did not give lip service to the beloved community, but lived it out, it would be Bill Weber.
As Walter Brueggemann says, prophecy is not telling you the future, it's telling the truth. And Bill Weber was a truth teller, as he saw it, about the needs of the church, about the needs of society, about the needs of culture. So I think he wore prophetic lenses. And then those lenses helped him to see the world and caused him to do the kind of things he did, whether it was the East Harlem Protestant Parish, or whether it was Must, or whether it was New York Theological Seminary, or Clergy and Laity Concern. That there was a drive, a central focus that made him do what he did and helped us all to see, as he saw the world, through the eyes of the prophets.
If there was a word I would use to characterize him, it was that he was authentic in every sense of the word. What you saw was what you got. He really was so authentic. He made you want to be. He just, he just made you want to be a better person, to be a more just person, to think about the common good in a new way, which means to think about the less fortunate person in most cases.
He was very humble. You know, you would never hear him talk about any of his credentials. But one of the really good things about Bill Weber is he understood as a Christian that when he came into prison, it wasn't simply about proclaiming the word. It was about being in fellowship with men in prison. And he was really big on koinonia, forming the sense of community wherever you find yourself, even if you find yourself up the Hudson River in Sing Sing.
And not only was he a theologian to us, not only was he an academic scholar, not only was he a person of mission within it, he was a friend. Bill was a friend. I mean, to every man that allowed him to be a friend, he was there.
If you needed something, I can't tell you the number of times he went into his own pocket to help students, or to help faculty, to help staff. I mean, he lived what he preached, right? He believed in being generous, and he was. And at the same time, doing it kind of behind the scene. There was no kind of bravado. He was not charismatic in the sense that he entered the room and everybody looked at him. He was charismatic in that he was consistent. Did what he said and he just kept doing it, and the rest of us followed in joy. I think the New York Seminary owes its rebirth to him. And then those of us who followed him tried to live it out because we shared that vision and were inspired by his commitment.
Bill Weber was a model, a paradigm of how it should be, because when he talked about justice, and when he talked about racism, when he talked about those things, they were not speeches. He lived this. There was no program similar to the Master Professional Studies program at a prison in the country. And he brought that about. So, and this was again for almost predominantly Black and Hispanic persons who were incarcerated. He looked at them as human beings. He looked at them as people who education would make a difference in their lives, and it did. Some of those graduates have become directors of some of the most important programs in this country. So that for me, as someone who worked in civil rights all of those years, I consider him absolutely a prophet for the cause of justice.
This elderly, white-haired old guy was such a powerful voice in the world of theological education, in the world of Christian mission. I mean, we had no idea who this guy was. He was just this guy who was being brought into the prison because his school, New York Theological Seminary, which we knew nothing about, wanted to offer a master's program. And to the men, that was gold. To the men, that was second to release, to have the privilege, the opportunity, the godsend to be able to participate in a master's degree program.
So Bill was prophetic in many ways, but he was really good at seeing beyond the green uniform that people in prisons wear and could get into your mind. And I think he could also get into people's souls.
I look up to him not only as that important figure, but as a mentor, as a teacher, as someone who you could have candid discussions about issues around the world and in this country.
So I think what woke him up in the morning and why he lived in East Harlem rather than in some other part of the city, why he did what he did and the work that he did at East Harlem Protestant Parish and the work he did at Must and at the seminary, was to try to make some dent in the issues related to injustice in our society.
I can envision the Bill Weber smiling down over the balconies of heaven, looking down upon his legacy now being led by an African-American woman, the Reverend Dr. Lakeesha Walrond, Vice President and Academic, Vice President and Dean of Academic Affairs, Dr. Tamara Henry. I could see him smiling down from those balconies, looking down on something that he started those years ago. Women were not in seminary. Black people, it was not a tradition of seminaries around the country to accept Black people, to accept Asian Americans, to accept Latinx, those communities. But he lived throughout his life, throughout his ministry, throughout all of the things that he did and accomplished. He was true. I think about, for him, how fitting it is the passage in Luke, 4th chapter, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, and anointed to bring good news to the poor, to pardon the prisoners. Bill Weber lived out that legacy, and so it is just a delight to even talk about him.
This is my Sing Sing poem, chronicling Sing Sing Prison by E.Z. Waters. First on a canal boat, later on freighter steamers, 100 men made an historic trip down the Hudson River in 1825. They weren't called galley slaves, but they were weighed down with chains. They arrived in Sing Sing, the village named after the indigenous Sing Sings. Popular history says they sold their land in 1685. The name, which has been interpreted as stone upon stone, is all that remains of those Algonquins and the prison, of course. An awesome mausoleum peopled with 614 tombstones, monuments to the chair. But all of that was later, after the foundation stone was laid. The prisoners labored to build their own cells, 7 feet deep, 3 feet 3 inches wide, and 6 feet 7 inches high. What could be crueler to dig their own graves, or to suffer the added indignity of having the graveyard called Mount Pleasant State Prison? Stone upon stone, granite known as Sing Sing marble. Prisoners cutting stones for public corporations, stones for a courthouse in Troy, stones for the State House in New Haven, stones for City Hall in Albany, stones for Fort Adams in Rhode Island. Convict labor offered at a premium price, working from dawn to dusk, cut in stone, granite known as Sing Sing marble. Poor production severely punished, shower baths, hair cropped close, darkened cells, ball and chains, yokes, long iron bars 4 inches wide, weights up to 40 pounds, strapped around the outstretched arms of the prisoners, with staples for neck and arm. An awesome burden for crime and punishment. Cut in stone, stone upon stone, granite known as Sing Sing marble. In 1926, more stone upon stone, granite known as Sing Sing marble. 2 more cell blocks, a capacity of 1,366, more than 2,000 total. In 1994, the gutted remains of the old Sing Sing stands, a monument to a time, the Stone Age, when prisoners were sent up and down the Hudson River. If you get close enough to the shore, to the granite known as Sing Sing marble, you can hear the ghosts of prisoners past, chronicling the history of Sing Sing. Stone upon stone, granite known as Sing Sing marble. $1 million contractors replace convict labor, slowly dismantling the stone upon stone, granite known as Sing Sing marble. Replacing it with fences, triple-layered razor wire, heat sensors around the perimeter, perhaps a mine or two. Floodlights have it on center stage. Sing Sing on the Hudson, an eyesore, an airy monument. Boats on the river, no longer freighter steamers, no longer carrying prisoners, galley slaves, but the memory remains. Shackled prisoners still call the buses that transport them to Sing Sing and all the other stone monuments boats. Boats up and down the Hudson River in early spring and throughout the summer and on into fall. Boats no longer peopled with convicts, but pleasure-seeking passers-by, boating and water skiing and windsurfing. Beautiful women weighted down with 2-piece bathing suits, smile and wave and sometimes flash as they dared to come close to the shore, defying the guard towers and the awesome history of the place. A punishment perhaps as cruel as the yoke, watching their bareback retreat, the waves lapping against the stone upon stone, granite known as Sing Sing marble. If you listen closely, you can hear the screams of the 614 people who walked the last mile, step by step, stone by stone, to eternity. If you listen even closer, over the waves lapping against the stone upon stone, granite known as Sing Sing marble, you can hear the other screams, the screams of men enduring different punishments nonetheless, and severe in their own way, in keeping with contemporary standards of punishment. Still, some bang their heads against the stones, stone upon stone, granite known as Sing Sing marble, a monument for the chronicler to pull apart, stone by stone, stone by stone.
Thank you, Eric. That was wonderful. Now you're here for the main event. President Lakeesha Walrond will now be in conversation with Tom Weber, Bill's son, who grew up in East Harlem, who was with him during most of the time as he was doing this pioneering work. He was close to many of the guys who was close to Bill, and he was sharing this moment with us. They will also be engaged in conversation with Julio Medina, the executive director of Exodus Transitional Community. Julio was also a graduate from the MPS program with Bill Weber. You will hear in this interview how Bill was transformational for Julio and for the work that he's doing today. And together in our partnership, as we work together, you hear how we're moving the seminary forward based on Bill's vision for the work of justice. So here they are.
So I'm so grateful today to be in conversation with Dr. Tom Weber and Julio Medina as we continue the conversation about the late great Bill Weber, and his legacy as a prophet, celebrating prophets for the cause of justice. So I just want to really start with Dr. Tom Weber, who is Bill Weber's son. Just tell us a little bit about how you saw your father. We know that the nation really celebrated him for all the work that he accomplished as a social justice advocate. But can you tell us your experience of him as your father?
Sure. But let's start by saying, please call me Tom. My dad always asked people to call him Bill. He wasn't comfortable with Professor Weber or President Weber or Dr. Weber. He thought that we were all just Tom and Lakeesha. So for this, call me Tom. I like the title, but Dad was a moral example to me and to the rest of our family. He was one of the people in my life that I've ever met that walked what he believed. He walked the walk. He didn't just talk about it. And so for most of my life, I've tried to use him as an example, think about what Dad would have done in such and such a situation. And I think he would be comfortable with being called a prophet. He hated to be called a martyr or a saint, but prophet, I think he would have been okay with, because he was always trying to be out front. He was always trying to prophesy what the next big cause was, who was most in need in our society, and that's where he wanted to be. So, yeah, I didn't decide to be a minister, but I think my brothers and sisters and I all became part of trying to make this world better. Teachers, social workers, health worker. So, yeah, he was our male role model.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit? You talked about him walking the walk. I remember a conversation that you and I had last fall, and you talked about how serious he took this call, to the extent that you all actually relocated. He relocated his family to a different part of the city. Can you talk a little bit about that?
That's right. He came out of World War II. He thought he went away to be on a destroyer escort. He was going to be a lawyer when he came back. He got a call from God sitting on the deck of the boat, and he felt he had called to be a minister. And when he came back, he was at Union Theological Seminary. I believe it was his second year, and he read an article in the New York Times that East Harlem on 100th Street between 1st and 2nd Avenue was the worst street in all of America, not just New York, the worst street in all of America. So he turned to two of his classmates and said, that's where we have to start our church. If that's the worst place, that's where people need us the most, more deaths, more prostitution, more drugs. That's where the church should be. We should start our ministry there. So he and two other seminary students went and checked out 100th Street, and they all decided that to have a real ministry, they needed their families to live and work in the same community. So Dad moved us into the projects on 102nd Street, Washington houses. We were the only white family in our building. Quite an experience. but I even wrote a memoir called East Harlem White Boy, because that's how I sort of identify now.
Wow.
Growing up in East Harlem as a white boy was probably the most important experience of my life.
Wow. 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 And we know that he had a love for criminal justice reform, and started this certificate program at Sing Sing Correctional Facility that led to the development of a master's of professional development. And so can you talk a little bit about his love for Sing Sing and the MPS program?
I think if I was ever jealous of anybody in my life, it would be the guys in Sing Sing, because Dad talked about them a lot more than he talked about me and my brothers and sisters. As I said before, he was always looking for the next frontier of where the church should be. And in the late 60s, I think, early 70s, he really saw the men and women incarcerated in this state and around this country were really the most in need of counseling, of a presence, of hope. And that's what he wanted to bring to them. That's where I first met Julio. Right, Julio? I think he was still there.
That's right. That's right. I was. Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
That's right.
And he just talked about you guys all the time. You were like his sons, man. All he wanted to talk about.
Yeah, he's amazing. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for bringing Julio into the conversation. So I've heard you tell many stories about Bill Weber, and certainly your conversation when he helped you to kind of see your life in a different view than you had previously been able to see. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So, and thank you all again for this opportunity. Well, you talk about Bill, where does one begin? I mean, and I speak, when I tell these stories, Dr. Walton, I speak on behalf of so many other men whose life he touched, as Tom mentioned. I'm just one of thousands of men that his life, he kind of just said, he sees something special in us that we didn't see in ourselves at that time. And Bill made us see that. He saw the goodness in us when we couldn't see it. And I was in Sing Sing. I ended up serving 12 years in prison, and I was fortunate enough to get into this master's degree program. And I'll never forget, Bill taught foundations of ministry. And, I think the first thing we had to do is memorize Ephesians 4:11 through 17. That was the first kind of homework assignment. I'm like, why am I memorizing this? And of course, it made all the sense in the world, right? The gifts he gave, that some may be prophets, some evangelists, some pastors, and teachers to equip the saints for the work of the ministry, for building up the body of Christ. And it goes on. But, when we think about that and we thought about the gifts that we all bring, we started recognizing that even in our differences, there's so much that we can do together. And it was one class that Bill talked about those differences and asked us to describe ourselves. And again, this is one of those opening classes, and I'm like, okay, I'm a dope dealer. Unfortunately, I polluted my communities, and I went to other communities, and I had a lot of people working for me. And, the unfortunate reality of what I was describing was what brought me to prison. And I didn't know how to talk about it. And I'm just going through the motions of it. So he's what is that? The hermeneutics of interpretation. Bill was the master at that. So he's like, you're bilingual. You went to these different communities and started something different. So he said, wow, you sound like a community organizer. And, for the first time, I was called something different. For the first time, I was looked at as someone that was different. Of course, I had to go up and look what a community organizer was, and did. But, I'm walking around the prison after that class like I'm a community organizer now, And it's just this feeling that Bill brought that just made us all light up. And I mean, Tom, you know this, you're a kid, but he was one of those guys that he could not see us for the crimes we committed, for the unfortunate, things we did in our community. Bill saw the God in us. He saw this light in us that allowed all of us, and I don't talk about myself, all of us to learn so much from him, for all of us to come out, he wanted us to be wounded healers, Henry Nouwen was one of the books that we had to read. Yeah. And, we were coming back to these communities to heal the same communities we once destroyed. Yeah. And I think Bill just epitomized what it means to be a prophet. Mm-hmm. And I always say, Bill did it when, mass incarceration wasn't sexy, right? I mean, we see all this now and what's taking place, it wasn't sexy back then when Bill was coming in. And not only did he come in to Sing Sing, when we were transferred, he went to Attica, he went to Comstock, he went to Green Haven. Any prison you are in, Bill is visiting you. And I think that just epitomizes, Bill, his work, and what he meant to so thousands of men who went through New York Theological Seminary's master's degree program.
Julio, I just wanted to say that you brought up this idea of you being a community organizer. I think that Dad really thought that all ministers of the gospel should be community organizers.
There we go.
You don't just preach in your church. You get out there in the community. You organize your community. You try and become somebody that transforms folks outside the church window, not just inside the church window. That's what he taught his ministry. Even when he first started East Harlem Protestant Parish, every minister had a church, but they also had to have a vocation that they worked on, like working with drug addiction, working with housing, working with youth, something like that. It was part of the group ministry. You couldn't just preach the gospel. You had to be out there working with people in need. So you're a perfect example, man. And I remember, Lakeesha, you should know this, maybe you don't know it. Julio officiated at my dad's funeral. He and a man named Reverend John Collins. Wow. In the middle of the funeral, Julio says, "Okay, all you guys up there in the balcony." And there were like 300 men who'd been incarcerated. It was quite a tribute to my dad. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom.
Yep.
Wow. Wow. What I hear as you all speak is a man who recognized that we are all, bigger than our worst mistake. We're better than our worst mistake. We're stronger, than our worst pain. And the fact that he was able to teach that as well as live that life is one of the reasons that I'm sure those 300 men were there honoring your father, who was serving them at a time when others weren't thinking about mass incarceration. And we're so proud. Of course, this is my first year as president at NYTS, but from the time I got there, I've been hearing nothing but great things about Bill Weber as well as Julio Medina. And so, Julio, can you talk a little bit about how your interaction with Bill Weber and the NPS program changed the trajectory of your life and led you to Exodus?
Sure. Thank you again. So we get into this program. It's a competitive program, as you know, Dr. Waldron, the NPS program. Competitive program. They take the top 15 throughout New York State prisons. We have to write an essay. So I'm going through the process, and I remember getting a letter from Bill saying, we have over 50 strong applicants. We're not sure you can make it in this year. I'm like, oh no, I got to get in this program, for all the wrong reasons initially, and I will tell you. So I'm like, I got to get into this program, So I kept writing Bill. Someone doesn't get transferred from Attica or something. I'm fortunate enough, I get into this program. When I say for all the wrong reasons, because the following year of that program, I was going to go to the parole board. So I said to myself, wow, wait a minute. Master's degree, parole board, this can get me home.
Mm.
So when I say all the wrong reasons, they were selfish reasons just for me trying to get out of prison. In month number 2, in October, and classes start September, in October, I realized that if I stayed in prison for the life sentence that I originally had, it wouldn't matter, because this program provided an identity. It provided the reshaping of my own life, of my own narrative, and if I ever did get to the street, what can I do? And it was those classes, and particularly that Bill came to, that helped shape my view and my vision of life. Because it didn't matter if there was 10 inches of snow, Bill was showing up. Every other class would be canceled except Bill's.
Wow.
If the trains weren't running, Bill would get in his car, slide all over the roads, leave 4 hours earlier, but he would be there with peanuts in hand. He would get peanuts from, as you know, Tom, when he would travel, back then they gave out peanuts on the airlines, and Bill was able to smuggle in all these peanuts to us.
Yep.
But the shaping of the NYTS program, of that NPS, in month 3 and month 4, I realized that my calling was to serve God, and my calling was to do some form of ministry that involved the many men I were around in prison. Because people don't, unfortunately, get to see the goodness of people in prison. What you see is maybe what you hear on the news, or the smirk from the kid's face when he's 17 years old and he committed a crime. I got to see that person 5 years, 6, 7 years later. I got to see them begin to get their GED, maybe take a college course. The lights begin to go on. I got to witness transformation in God's work at its finest. Taking someone who had probably had the roughest past in the world and creating this new specimen of life that can't, if you would hear some of the things, you wouldn't believe it's the same person. I got to witness that transformation. I got to witness that because Bill Weber was able to open my own eyes, was able to show me, Julio, there's goodness in you. And just as there's goodness in you, there's goodness in your brother, in your classmates. So, Dr. Waldron, for me, I think, the experience that allows me to do the work I do today is all shaped around the seminary. It's all shaped around that Sing Sing program. It's all shaped, and I want to say, Tom, I don't know if you remember this, but you were at Edwin Gould Academy back then.
Right.
And Tom was the director. And I met Tom, and this is when I was still trying to finagle my way out of prison. And when I met Tom, I said, hey, Tom, can I have a letter that I can work at Edwin Gould Academy when I go to the parole board? And sure enough, I woke up afterwards, but Tom had that letter.
And you never did come to work for me, though.
I never got there.
All right.
But
you sent Lonnie to work for me instead, right?
There you go. But that hope, Tom, that hope for someone inside, that hope to go around and show the other men, hey, listen, there's some value in me. This guy, Tom, sees something in me that no one ever seen. People like Bill, your dad, gave me something that no one ever saw before. And I think, excuse me. I don't sit in this chair alone. Bill is here. Bill, I've had some tremendous success, if you want to call it that. But that's all due to the Weber family. And I count you in that, Tom, as well. So I'm honored to have had, Bill take the time to believe in me and thousands of men that he's touched. I do this work, but there's so many others that can give you the same sentiment and the same testimony about Bill and the work that he's done and the lives that he's changed. And so many of us are running organizations or just great fathers, established families, helping our communities in any way we can. You know, we are not Dr. Waldron, as you know, that worst moment of our lives. But Bill provided the blueprint for us to help transform our lives.
Well, thank you.
I think that my father's legacy is really in you folks, Julio, you and all the other guys. Religious education, theological education, a place like New York Theological Seminary was really at the heart of what he wanted to do, how transform the world through other people, not through his own work, but through all the work that you guys do. It's truly amazing. And he did, you are his son.
Thank you. Thank you.
So that makes you my brother. You makes me, you're my brother, man.
Thank you. Thank you. Definitely, Tom. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much, Julio, for sharing. We certainly can read about the impact of Bill Weber's life, but to hear it firsthand and the difference that he made in your life certainly helps me to understand the importance of this program, even as we think about the future. And certainly with everything that's going on in our country right now, with all of the protests that are happening all over the world, in recognition of the fact that Black lives matter, that all lives matter. It's even more important now than ever for us to continue this work and continue this legacy. This is a legacy that I'm living in, that I've walked into, and I certainly want to make sure to live up to that legacy. And we want to continue to ensure that the NPS program thrives at Sing Sing. We're looking to reestablish those certificate programs across other correctional facilities in the state of New York. And I really think it's a program that should be a national model of social justice and redemptive justice.
Yes.
And so as we continue to move forward and talk about expansion and look to have this program in a women's facility as well, because while we graduated over 412 men from the NPS program since 1982, which is when it started, we still have a lot of work to do, still have a lot of eyes to open. And so, Tom, I want to give you, the last word in terms of how important it is to you, to your family, and your extended family of thousands of men who've come through the certificate and this master's program, the importance of us continuing this program in the future, and how this program can really impact and change the lives of those who come into contact with NPS, started through your father, Bill Weber.
Yes, thank you. And Julio and Lakeesha, thanks so much for joining this conversation. I don't think there was any institution or program closer to my father's heart, the New York Theological Seminary, especially at this time in our history, with such racial divide, with such tension, with such also opportunity to really make a change in this world. We need NYTS more than ever. Dad would have wanted this program to continue, and I think under Lakeesha Walrond's presidency, it's going to get deeper, it's going to get stronger, it's going to influence and impact on more people, on more communities. And I would only ask everyone listening out there today, everyone watching this, go to nyts.edu and make a contribution, make a donation of whatever size, so that this incredible work, this transformative work, this redemptive, revolutionary work can continue. It would be the greatest legacy for my family, for my father, Bill, if we could continue and if NYTS could prosper and become even more impactful in the world as we proceed forward. So again, please go to nyts.edu and make a sizable contribution.
Thank you so much, Tom. And I just want to thank you and your family for your faithfulness to NYTS. We're so grateful for your generosity, as well as Julio and Exodus. Thank you so much for your continued generosity to our program. We recognize that every dollar matters. It makes a difference, and we appreciate all of our donors. And so we hope that you will take this opportunity to partner with us and to give, so that we can continue this program, that we can expand this program, that we can see this program giving birth to other programs in our state and even in our nation. We're so grateful to Bill Weber for his cause of justice, for him being a prophet, and for leaving us such a rich legacy. And it is our responsibility to continue that legacy, and I'm committed to doing that work. So thank you both again. We will continue to have these conversations as we continue to go deeper and deeper into this work. God bless you both. And we look forward to talking to you soon. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for joining us during this time. I hope you enjoyed the time. I hope you learned something new about Bill, learned something new about the seminary, and got a glimpse of our vision for where we want to go with all the things that we've been entrusted with at New York Theological Seminary. It is an amazing legacy that we've inherited, and one that we intend to expand. We want to expand the Masters of Professional Studies to a women's facility. We want to empower our alumni who have gone back to their own facilities to use their degrees to improve their communities. We want to empower our alumni who are now home to continue that legacy and that work of peace and justice. And all this is only possible because of you, because of donors and supporters like you. And so I ask that you join us, make a gift, and help us to continue this work. Thank you, and may God bless you.